It's the What Are You Driven By podcast, where we dive deep to see what motivates and drives our community's best leaders. Welcome back to the What Are You Driven By podcast, where we discover what drives our community's best leaders and how they engage their teams to achieve their potential. I'm your host, Diondra Filicetti, the author of the book Engagement Economics and a professional speaker and trainer. More importantly, today I am joined by Faith Tull, a Chief Human Resources Officer and independent consultant with over 30 years experience. And she's got a great story to share. Welcome, Faith.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure to have you. And, it's an interesting story how we got connected, which I'll share for later or save for later in the podcast. I'd like for you to just introduce yourself to our listeners and share a little bit more about who you are.
Okay. So I'm Faith, and I have about 30 years, well, actually more than 30 years experience working in the profession of human resources. I've worked in many different industries and have worked with like large and small organizations. Also an author. I had a book published about two years ago. And I'm excited to be here to share my story. I've, worked in senior level positions for many years, learned a lot. So, and I'm still learning, actually. That's a part of who I am, just continuous learning and just trying to be better than I was yesterday.
I love that. A lifelong learner. And, in that short introduction, you shared so much. And I've got so many questions about the different facets of your life and of your career. But first and foremost, you talked about the fact that you've worked at large organizations and small organizations. So, what's been your experience and what's the difference between a large organization or a small organization?
One of the biggest things I've noticed is the nimbleness of the smaller organization. So I've worked with small local companies where you're able to move a lot quicker. You're able to do things quicker. And a lot of them have been startups, for instance, where decisions are made pretty rapidly. Whereas a large multinational, sometimes it can take weeks, if not months, to make things happen. So, like the excitement level can wane a little bit when you're waiting, but there's learning everywhere, right? And you just learn how to navigate the world. And speaking of the world, I've worked, globally as well. So that brings another element when you're working with people from different cultural backgrounds and expectations are different. The way you communicate is different. And it's just all learning from there.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. Tell us more about that. Where have you worked? And what were the
so I've
learnings?
worked with, organizations that are either Canadian or they were US based or, for instance, globally overseas, whether it's the UK, Netherlands, and so forth. But when you have employees across the globe, you have to understand the different cultures. So for instance, I had employees in China, in Shanghai. And the way you manage and communicate with their leaders and their teams is just very different. And one simple thing that I had to learn was I couldn't go to my HR manager in China and just speak to one of her team members, because I had a question. I had to make sure that my HR manager was also in the room when I'm speaking to this employee, because I understood it to be that it was seen as disrespectful to that leader. And I was like, oh, that is something that I never thought of, because I'm very open person and I'm very approachable and I just approach people, naturally, just to get a number or a figure or an answer that I know they would know. But it's seen as disrespectful. So I had to learn to invite the manager into all of these conversations. So that was one of the things I had to learn really quickly, because they didn't want to disrespect their leader by having a meeting with me who was several levels above them.
Yeah.
That's just the way it was.
Yeah, very interesting. And it's these minor cultural differences and our approaches to work that although they seem small, they have a big impact. They have a big effect.
They
And
really do. They really do. And I think, what other cultures, this is what I've noticed, is that while North America may feel that they're the center of the universe, folks who are living in their part of the universe, that should be as respected, the same
mm,
way that we respect ours. So they just want folks to listen and understand and, respect the perspectives that they're bringing to the table as
yeah.
well. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think listening is a very important characteristic of a leader. So, kind of bringing it back to your leadership experience, you
Mhm.
mentioned that you've been in senior leadership roles. And what does that leadership mean to you?
Oh man. And I tried to write down some notes on this and then I was just all over the page. But one of the biggest things for me is it's a privilege, and I think that's where I ended up. I felt like everything considered, being a leader is a privilege. It's an area that is so impactful to people and their lives and livelihoods. It's a privilege to be in that role, and I don't feel it should be taken for granted. So think about the leadership footprint you want to leave. And I've had to learn to think about that. So when I was thrown into leadership, I had to learn quickly that it's not just about me. I don't know everything, and this is actually where my leadership, my learning starts. When you become a leader, people are very different. They're motivated very differently. So your leadership style should adjust, according to who's in front of you.
Mhm.
Not that you're going to change, your direction, for instance, in terms of where you're going to go, but adjust it to the style of the person, and what
Mm.
they, are motivated by. So, and it's a privilege to be in that role, like we're humans, we're all here, we all have a job to do, our titles end up being different, but to lead a group of people, I feel it's a privilege that shouldn't be taken for granted.
Wow. I love that sentiment. Um, it really shows the grace with which you lead and coming from a lens of understanding where these people are at. And, whether it's leading globally and understanding cultural customs or
Mhm.
just understanding the person next to you and what they're motivated by so that you can adjust your communication. I think
Yes.
that's such a respectable approach to leadership.
Mm.
I really, really love that. And I wonder, in terms of the other characteristics, like, were there other characteristics you felt that, when you entered a leadership position, what were some of those characteristics that you needed to lean on or bring to the table as a leader?
I always looked at the leaders that I respected, as I was,
Mm,
building my career, and tried to embody some of that. I think we all have our own unique twists to things. So showing up as a charismatic leader, I think charisma is hugely important, and
mm,
being able to influence people and have people actually listen to you, right? So there has to be a certain level of confidence in how you speak. There has to be a certain level of, they have to trust you that you know what you're doing. So obviously you have to be competent in
yeah.
what you're doing and what you're saying, and do your homework so that when you're speaking to them and talking about the different goals and where the team is going, they're going to listen, and you've got to be a good storyteller to tell that story in a compelling
Mm,
way so that people are able to rally around you. So charisma is something that I thought, what, I like, those are the leaders that I like. And you have to be able to relate to people in such a way that they're gonna want to follow you, right?
yeah.
So you can't have leadership without followership. And I'm sure there's probably a better word for that nowadays, but in order to lead a team, and motivate them, you have to have people who kind of, have that level of respect for you.
Yeah.
um, a couple other things I want to mention. I think decision making as a leader is really important. That is something that your team wants from you. This is now where you're getting paid, right? You're the leader. where are we going, what are we doing, why are we doing it, and how are we going to get there. So being able to set the tone and make the decisions, for the group. And then the other thing for me personally, and I was a big advocate of this, is team advocacy. You really have to have your teams back. You don't put them in a position where they're going to feel that, okay, my leader doesn't support me, or, you've made a decision and they're going to get in trouble with someone above your leader type of thing. Have your teams back, and they need to know that. So team advocacy, I think, is a really, really big one.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, because in a lot of the dinner time stories that you hear, or people complaining about their boss, it's those types of things, where the boss stabbed you in the back, or
Yes.
didn't have your back when it came to, the senior leader coming in. And, that's the quickest way to break trust on a team, I think.
100%. And then they're not happy. They're going to talk to their teammates about you. And the trust is broken, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the point about charisma as well.
Oh,
That's the first time I've heard that answer on a podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
that's huge to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And
yeah,
all the, the people that you respect, like, they have a sense of charisma, and that charisma is what makes you want to be in their presence, what makes you want to follow them.
Yes.
I'm so glad we put that on paper here, on an audio file.
So good. Well, when I think of two great leaders that I've worked for, that is what they embody. They just have charisma. And sometimes it's you can't teach certain things, and you either have it or you don't, because if you try and you try too hard and you don't have it, it's obvious to people. But sometimes it's just that charisma. They walk in a room and the energy shifts, and people are just listening, and they're able to just speak to you I try to speak as natural as possible to folks, because I just feel like using unnecessary words is just unnecessary. So, at the end of the day, it's just having that personality to connect and to, just basically shine in a way that someone else doesn't know how to do, or just doesn't come naturally to them. But just having charisma is, I think it's huge.
I think so too. I think even outside of leadership, just those people who have that, and who have that magnetic personality, you're right, it can't be taught, but for some reason you listen to them, you pay attention when they walk into a room. You're excited.
Exactly. And that's why, I want to go back to it. It's a privilege, and it shouldn't be taken advantage of, right? So you can have charismatic leaders who lead you down the wrong path, which is quite dangerous. So, I really think it's just that whole, what's that whole Spider-Man saying, with great power comes great responsibility.
Oh, Uncle Ben, I love that scene. I've used that in trainings before.
Did you?
I have a picture of Uncle Ben telling Spider-Man, the original Spider-Man, original to me.
Yes. Because my original is probably different from yours.
That's what I wonder. Because there was 3 in my lifetime, so the original was Tobey Maguire.
Yeah, no, there's been many.
So Faith, okay, so on the opposite side of the coin, I'm sure in your 30 years of experience, there were also difficult times, harder lessons. So when you think of all the challenges, can you think of one of your greatest challenges in leadership, and what did that look like?
Yeah, so I had accepted a role where I was reporting to a director. 3 weeks later, that person was not in the organization anymore, and I was the next in line. And, the president decided to give me the opportunity to see what I can do with the team. And, it was a poisoned work environment. Nobody trusts anyone. The business didn't respect us, and we were in human resources. And the turnover was it was like 150% turnover in like 18 months. It was absolutely ridiculous. So there's me, new to the organization, faced with this challenge. And I had to make the decision, take it or leave it, or, show what I can do. So the first thing for me was really to get everybody together. There were a lot of siloed conversation that happened with this previous leader. So people had their own agendas. So the key thing for me was to get everyone on the same page, and basically said, we've got to get our shit together, or else we're not going to be successful. And here's what the business needs from us. Here's what I need from you as a team. And here's how we're going to work together. And that's what we're going to do, is work together, because there is no individuality here. We're definitely going to have to be a unit to be successful. And most people wanted to be successful. They were actually happy that this person had finally left the organization. So, I had no playbook. I had no idea where I was going to start, but I just thought, let's just all start at where we're supposed to be or end up, and piece it out in terms of how we're going to achieve this. So we looked at, low hanging fruits, like simple little things, like let's not go for the big grandiose plan right now. Let's do the simple things that the business needed us to do, and let's do it well. And then we just kind of, chunked it off and just kind of grew from that. But it was scary. It was very scary, because I was new as well to the organization, hadn't planned on being in that role. For personal reasons.
Wow.
Yeah, so overcoming that was phenomenal. And, in 8 months, I was promoted to that, senior level position. And the group, it was like night and day to the business in terms of how we kind of showed up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the things I love, like my favorite topic obviously is engagement and drive and motivation. And so, you've transformed the engagement of this team. So
Yeah.
aside from this situation and this big challenge that you overcame, what are some of your other approaches to engaging teams?
I always start with, do we all know why we're here? Like, what is the purpose of what we do on a daily basis? And so that people can just feel that sense of accomplishment when you're doing a task. It's not just do it for the sake of doing it. So it's engaging people with the purpose and the goal, making sure that we're all on the same page, finding out the different levels of people that you have in terms of their skills, who can do this piece best, and focusing, the energies around certain things, like say, data analytics. That is not my strong suit. I certainly brought data to the executive table when making decisions, but that was an individual on my team, and that was great at it and wanted to do it. Other folks, loved things like, recruitment and selection. Others liked onboarding, others like training. So just find folks that have a passion in the different functional areas of your department, and make sure that we're all aligned and understand the broader picture and the bigger goal. And communication for me is really huge. So when you engage folks in the timelines and the plans and how we're doing and tracking, people get, they get motivated by that.
Just looking at the different strategies to, if you're faced with a disengaged team, what are some of the ways that we can engage them, re-engage them?
Yeah, I think find out why they're disengaged, for one. I know that people will do, things like employee surveys, but, the more I read about that, the more I find out folks don't trust that information. And there's memes about it online, which I think leaders should take seriously. And I don't blame employees, because I've seen bad behaviors. So I think engagement is not just, let's have a pizza party, or let's have a bake sale, and, let's do breakfast or something like that. I think engagement is really finding out what drives people, what motivates them. Sometimes you can't fix all of the issues, but I think if you address it up front, they're adults, and they will get it. So what I mean by that is, pay is always an issue that will demotivate people and will drive them to say, I'm not happy with this organization, I want more money. there are times where you cannot meet them to their expectations. But what you can do is to say, here's where we are. Here's where I'm going to try to get you to, just based on how well the company's performing, how well you're performing, etc. But being open and honest, and maybe seeing where else you could meet them. And again, it's not having a pizza lunch, something more meaningful depending on the, company's budgets and stuff like that. So it's finding out from people, like giving them the information and just say, what are some of the things that we can do just to show you. And also just living up to your commitments. If you say you're going to do something, do it, right? It's like, people will say we haven't brought pay to the level of inflation, which is true. It's not just people saying it. Statistics will show that. But at the end of the day, I think from a fiscal responsibility, it's not feasible for us to bring it up 10% or 15%. But where can we get to over the next 2 to 3 years? And people, when they understand that, they will, support you and get behind the plan. But when you don't communicate, when you lie, when you make false promises, folks will be very disengaged. So communicating, sharing the plan, I think will help. When you don't have the resources to make an impact immediately.
I agree. And I think that level of transparency where you're almost bringing someone into, the mindset of what the leadership team is faced with.
Yes.
And it's almost like once they are actually thinking about the challenges faced by the leaders and almost being invited into understand, then there is that understanding.
Yes.
Right? Because at the end of the day, we have a business to run, and the business has to be successful, and then we will all be successful.
Exactly. But if folks aren't motivated, they're not producing as well, that's going to impact, not just your leadership, not just the company, but the shareholders and so on and so forth. So I think if we could communicate and draw people in and engage them, with what you're working with as much as you can, right? Folks will understand and they will respect it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big balancing act, like balancing the needs of the organization with the needs of the people, with the needs of the customer. It's a lot for a leader.
Agreed.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's your opinion on team building? I know that sometimes it gets a bad rap. Some people feel like it's a good thing, some people don't. What do you think?
I think it depends, right? I always find it a nice thing to do. But I think it can be individualized, with departments, not everybody's motivated the same way, and not everybody will want to do the same activity, for instance, right? But there's a couple of things like, if you want to do things like, finding out the personality types of your team, and that is a team building activity so that you all have a common language, that's helpful, in terms of individual teams' growth. But say, for instance, I had a company that they're like, let's all go to the ball game. Let's all go to watch baseball or Raptors. That's assuming that everybody is interested in doing that. So I think blanketed solutions to team building, you're going to lose some people because some of them are just not interested. But if you could individualize it with different departments and different teams, I don't see anything wrong with that. I think people need that, and they also need a break from work, the churn of that. So sometimes you do need to just recognize that, okay, hey, we have really, made an impact this month. Let's all do something fun, right? And I think the other part to be careful about is the team building that involves drinking and that type of partying. As an HR leader, I've seen really bad things come from those drinking parties and had to make some decisions the next day that wasn't in the favor of employees. So we've got to be very careful with that. And, having proper, guidelines around anything involving alcohol is really, really important. But, we've got to be careful about that because that doesn't motivate everybody.
I would agree, yeah. And it's almost exclusive because whether for wellness purposes or religious purposes or whatever decision, not everybody's going to partake. And I think that
Exactly.
creates some exclusion for sure.
Exactly. So I think it's a hit and miss, but I do think
Yeah.
that I don't think you should not do it. I just really think, find out what's going to work.
Yes, in terms
And
of team building.
yes, and
Yeah.
and what's going to be consistent across the board if you can do it. But yeah, I think it's important. I mean, people come to work, they work hard, they do want a break and want a reward sometimes. And I think that also unifies a company.
Yeah, I would agree too. And if you can find the activities that are inclusive and that are fun and that have a low barrier to entry for people and
Yes.
get them communicating, collaborating and working together, I think, we just got to be creative about what the solution is.
Exactly. Exactly. And like giveaways, I find that folks like giveaways as well. They like company swag.
Yeah,
And that tends to be fun, and it's a sense of pride for folks as well.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, with all your experience, I'd love to know, is there a piece of advice that either you wish you had received at the beginning of your leadership journey or
Mhm.
something that you would like to impart on someone who's starting their leadership journey?
Yeah, okay. So for me, it's hard. Like, balancing the whole, your team goals with the organization goals. It's a really fine line because a lot of the times I can't do everything that I want to do, um, because it doesn't jive with the organizational goals, right? So in a senior level position where you're a part of the strategic plan and making the decisions for the company, and you have to let people down because they
Mhm.
wanted a certain outcome or a certain direction. So that is a really, really tough balance because a lot of times you're not able to share exactly what is happening, depending on the confidentiality of it, depending on the cost of it. There are some things you just don't want to overwhelm employees with, and especially if the timing isn't great. And
Ah,
folks don't always know, some of the behind the scenes that goes into certain decision making. So it's a very delicate fine line where you're trying to build trust, but you have, a bigger issue to deal with. And some of it has to do with like the longevity of the company, the sustainability of the company.
mm,
There are certain times you just don't want to share that right away to panic people. It gets out in the media, and nowadays things get out in the media so much quicker than before. So I think that balance is very delicate. And yeah, I wish I'd known how hard that was.
yeah.
So I think for new leaders, it might go to what I'd said earlier in, it's a privilege. Leave your ego at the door. You don't know everything, and be ready to learn. A lot of folks will get promoted because technically they're very strong. They're great at what they do, but then they have no idea how to replicate themselves in others. So this is where you need leadership training in terms of how to motivate folks, how to reward, how to communicate, how to influence with authority, without authority. So this is where you're learning, and especially if you are a brand new leader and you've never even managed like a summer student before. You definitely need to take the time to learn, to
Mhm.
listen, and work on your communication skills, because
Yeah.
that is really, really key.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
good point even about a summer student. I think, having some mentorship experience,
Yeah.
anything, I think is really important. And
Yes.
do you have any advice on, I think we're digging even deeper here, on when you're trying to motivate people and when you're trying to get people excited, what are some of the things that you would recommend someone does? If someone came to you and they've got no leadership experience, they're like, I don't know how to motivate my team. Like, what do I have to say? What do I have to do?
Mhm. Um, wow, that is that it's not a blanket answer that I have. I think the key thing is to listen and learn and understand your people. So one of the key things for me was to have one-on-one individual meetings with folks. Get to know them personally as much as they're comfortable sharing. Who is this person in this picture on your desk? Oh, you have a pet. Engage with them personally. I had a senior leader that was going to be promoted to, the highest position in the company, but they didn't take the time to learn people's names. As simple as learning people who are working for you, their names, and they've spoken to you over 10 times, or that they have a child, or, just something that they're interested in doing. So just get to know people individually first, understand what drives them and what motivates them, listen a lot, and then, don't be so mechanical about, interactions. Just be natural, be yourself and be respectful. So I think that always works. People want real people. They don't want machines. We already have AI doing things that it wasn't doing before. Bring the human side to it. How are you? How was your child's recital or something like that? Just find out about people, and I think that draws them to you as a leader because you know them personally outside of just the work. We are there to work, but we're also human, and we're also individuals that are impacted by some of the things that happens at home. So try to remember just little things about individuals. It does go a long way.
Yeah, building that relationship, and then sometimes working together gets a lot easier once you've got a foundation there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But again, this is something I had to learn. There's a fine line between being a friend and being a leader, right? Because there are times where you have to make tough decisions. And if you've crossed the line of friendship, that can come back and bite you. And I have learned that the hard way myself. So I think it's really important that you make that distinction. You're still their leader. I still want to respect you and know you as a person. But at the end of the day, I'm still the person that is responsible from a leadership perspective, and you're going to be held to a higher standard. That comes into play, especially when you go from co-worker to leader, right? So as a co-worker, you all could be on the same page. You could be lunching together, vacationing together, who knows? And then all of a sudden you're the leader. How do you make that distinction? That is something to consider.
We could have a whole nother episode.
Another podcast. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that will happen. And, like I said, I've personally experienced it the hard way. And I've coached leaders, who have made mistakes the hard way. So it's like I said, leadership should not be taken for granted. It is a privilege, and it is something that folks need to really dig deep to continue to better themselves, right? Our environment has changed, quite a bit. It's kind of flip-flopped with, we're going to be very, very inclusive, to all of a sudden the impacts of certain political agendas has changed that. And now what do we do with this? Now how do we navigate this situation? So we're continuing to learn and adjust. And I think just being open-minded to learning. And as I said, your learning starts when you become a leader. So environment and society is going to continue to change, and it's a reflection of what's in the work environment as well.
Absolutely. Now, I wanted to go back to the beginning because you mentioned you are an author as well. I wanted to shed a little bit of light for our listeners on, I know we're nearing the end of the episode, but I want everyone to know, what is your book about? Where can they find it? What's it called? Give us everything.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. It's called Beyond These Eyes, and it's a memoir. And I was born in Jamaica, and I came to Canada when I was 9.5, almost 10. So it's the first 10 years of my life. And I wanted to do that because I am writing a part 2 currently. And it'll be from I got to Canada to now. And, some of the challenges I faced. So growing up, like for many reasons, and, I'd say you have to read the book. I didn't go to school until I came to Canada. And there were a lot of challenges, around that where I just didn't have certain foundations and so forth. And I just felt it important to share that story because, again, when you're working and you're working with people, everyone has a different background. Everybody has a story. So I felt it was important to share my story because there was no silver spoon here. And, at the end of the day, just had to overcome adversity to be who I am today. And I just wanted to share that first formative years. And now I'm going to continue on. So, right, I had it on Amazon, but now people can, reach me through LinkedIn, and I could do it directly if someone messages me on LinkedIn.
Okay, great. Okay,
Yeah.
That's where we know where to get it.
Yeah.
And when is part 2 coming out? Do we know yet?
I'm targeting the end of the year. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So I was to do it about a year and a half ago. I had some personal challenges and tragedies in the family, and it just stalled me quite a great deal, and continue to work through some of those things. But yes, I've written 3 chapters, and I feel good. So my target is the end of the year.
Exciting. You'll have to let us know when that's out. And then I'll put some links to Faith's LinkedIn in the bottom of the episode so that you'll know where to reach out.
Awesome.
But Faith, I've got to ask you, this is the question that I ask everyone on the podcast. We need to know, what are you driven by, Faith?
Okay. So, and it ties in greatly with what we were just talking about in terms of my book. I'm driven by overcoming adversity and proving to myself that I can do it. Even though I know I can do it, I just, I just always find something else that's challenging and wonder, can I do this? Can I overcome this? So for someone who was basically illiterate at 10, I have my master's degree. I'm now an author. I was a lecturer. My goal right now is to be on board of directors, paid board of directors. So it's just always challenging myself to do it and figuring out how to do it. So I just took a course, and I'll give a plug to the BDN network, Board Diversity Network, a great program to help with readiness and governance on being on board. So with that, plus my 30 years experience, I'm putting it out there. I'm ready for board of directors work. So I'm always challenged with, can I do it? How can I impact? And how can I overcome this? Especially if it's a fear, it just drives me to do my best. And, don't you dare tell me I can't do something, because I'll show you that I can.
That's right.
Yeah.
No matter how big the challenge is, Faith is going to go after it. Wow. I have to say, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing that story, just to know, the roots that you came from and the challenges that you faced before your journey, during your journey, and then, even now, the challenges are changing and are differing, but you're overcoming each and every one of them. And I just want to let everyone know how I met Faith was actually, I was doing research and I found an article on Faith, and I thought, what if I reach out to Faith? That's been one of my approaches. What if? And I did, and we chatted, and now we're here together. So I have to say, you're so inspiring, and there's so many more questions I want to ask, but we're just simply out of time. But if people want to get in touch with you, you mentioned LinkedIn. Is that the place where they can find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram as well. I do have my author page, which I need to update. But LinkedIn, or send me an email. That's on my LinkedIn page as well. Yeah, that would probably be the best way right now.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. It's been such a pleasure to chat with you.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you, Diondra. And I'm glad you reached out.
Me too. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to the What Are You Driven By podcast. We hope that you'll join us next time for another incredible leadership story. Make sure you subscribe and connect with us online at Driven by Co.